Hello, and welcome to what I am going to be calling from now on Majunda Minute, which is the name of this, whatever this podcast is more or less going to be. I had asked for several different names for the name for the podcast itself, but most of them, they were all good ideas. It's just I didn't think. Well, I thought I should at least try and at least tie it to myself. And also because Majunda Minute, it's kind of like a parody of Meta Minute. Like, because if anyone was around 3 years ago when the game first released, does anyone remember Pokemon? Pretty influential, I'd say. Besides Gaming Beaver, he was kind of the main Jurassic World Live YouTuber. He talked about the game deeply, talked about data mines, leaks. He held several art contests and all cool shit in general. And then he left because he was getting tired of the game. And it was such a shame because he left right at around the time when 2.0 came around and, more or less pulled the game out of the pit it was stuck in during the, more or less the mediocrity of everything before 2.0, with Immunity and busted Gemini Titan and Indoraptor Gen 2. But anyway, that's besides the point. This is, something I've been kicking around the idea of for a while, mostly because it's a very unutilized niche. There was only one, it was Meta Minute, and it ended years ago. And I thought, what better time than now, when I have basically tons of free time, when I'm not busy fighting against the weather of my own state and trying not to pass out from heat exhaustion. So I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm known by quite a few aliases online. Main one is King Crossbreed. The main Jurassic World Live one I use is Majunda Boa, Majdumpa Boa. And that's what most people in this community know me for. On Twitter, there's my tiny micro community. I'm known as the Nemies. I use Smilin' Nemies as my alias, and there's quite a few others I won't bother to mention. But I'm just gonna refer to myself as Majdump here. So, and I believe when I finish this, I'm going to make this whole podcast its own channel instead of uploading it onto my main channel, King Crossbreed. I'm still unsure because one, it'll be a little difficult just to gather a bunch of people into something that basically has no attention. But then again, and instead I could use my regular channels like a launching pad for it. But on the other hand, it would probably be better for me to just make a separate channel because my main channel is mostly for me and whatever videos come to mind, which are sometimes Jurassic World Live related videos, but they're more of the shit posts I make, which what I'm known for, at least in this community. So, moving on, we've got. Wanted to briefly talk about the possibility of an update coming soon, like the rumor 2.9, because if you remember about a week, 2 weeks ago, I had. If you follow me on Instagram on Majdumpa Boa, I had posted this little video of me discussing the recent data mine and the new creatures and all that. And I wanted to briefly get into the possibility of when that update's going to be coming around. So, in the data mine, there were several things found. Besides new creatures, it included new raids. And one of them is something called Megalotops. And I speculated that since Megalonyx, a giant ground sloth that was found in the code, that Megalotops is likely a hybrid between it and some sort of ceratopsian or something with tops in its name. But it says its raid is going to be introduced on August 1st. And at the time I'm recording it, it is July 20th. So we could be seeing patch notes for this update this Friday, sometime this week. It could be next week as well. I could be completely wrong. I'm not always correct on these predictions. I like to pretend I'm pretty good at predictions, but I'm not. That's just how unfortunate I am as an individual. Now, moving on. Also, by the way, this first episode's going to be very short because I don't have many topics, and I'd really like to get this thing off the ground before I start recording hour-long episodes. Who knows? Maybe I could get some people on here. That'd be very interesting to have. I'll have to figure out how I can do that. But speaking of the update, I'm going to briefly once again talk about the balance changes, or at least the expected ones. So, if many of you should know, is that resilience as a class have been kind of almost universally accepted as being too strong. And there's a lot of reasons why. And it's mostly, I'd say, I'd blame it on two things. One, there's an abundance. They are the most prevalent class in the game. And two is just Resilient Strike as an ability. Because Resilient, like, what is going to be changed is Resilient abilities like Resilient Strike, Impact, Rampage, that stuff. They're going to be changed so that they no longer apply deceleration to the target. Instead, that it's going to be applying vulnerability. And the main issue people had with Resilient abilities to begin with was because how much it crippled Cunnings. And I know Resilients are supposed to be the counter of Cunnings, but typically things that are countered need to try pretty hard to be effective at being their counters. And the thing is, Resilients are too strong in a lot of reasons, in a lot of ways, and it's mostly because they can pretty much win any matchup they face. Even something like a pure Fierce going off a facing off against a pure Resilient. If that Fierce does not have any form of deceleration resistance, and especially since most Fierces don't have that much health, the Fierce could be killed on turn 2, while the Resilient survives with either a decent chunk or barely enough health to fight in the next turn. Because since deceleration is so easily accessible for Resilience, it's kind of their signature. So it means that the things they counter and the things that are supposed to counter them have to try extra hard just to match them. And I think most people can relate when they say, like, Cunnings are probably the weakest class in the game right now. And hopefully with this change, this is going to allow for a little bit more breathing room for the Cunnings and give the pretty much totally useless part of the Fierce abilities of cleansing vulnerability an actual use for once. And I also, a little thing to mention is that I believe with the inclusion of this change of the Resilient ability, I expect a lot of creatures to lose their resistance to vulnerability. It's kind of, if besides deceleration and distraction and like those big effects that it's really cool and good to have resistances for them, vulnerability is kind of one of the most abundant resistances in the game. Like almost everything released post 2.0 has some form of vulnerability resistance or gained some form of vulnerability resistance. I am certainly no stranger to it. Like, a lot of the things I use have some form of vulnerability resistance or immunity. So, we won't know for sure until it arrives. So, I'd say just keep an open mind, keep in mind what I've said, but also don't treat me as like some sort of amazing authority figure. I'm a guy who's trapped in a room that's nearly 80 degrees, like for most of his days. So I'm not exactly a super reliable source of information. I try to be as reliable as I can, but I'm just one guy. Now, I'm gonna wrap this up just because was a nice little test run, and I hope you enjoy the background image I made. It's kind of what I was telling myself that you better finish it, because if you don't finish that image, you're never going to get around to recording it, and that's certainly true. I sat on finishing that image for 2 days, because I thought, well, one, because I was overheating, but also because I was unsure about sitting down and recording my own voice and playing it back and listening to my own voice and seething at the thought of my own voice. But I'm gonna plug my socials, mostly just the Drexel Live ones, because I'm gonna make this a separate channel and all that. That's the idea. So I'm mostly active as a member of this community as Majunda Boa on Instagram, and on Twitter, if you ever use it, I am the Nemies. Shouldn't be too hard to find me on there. Like, nobody uses that name. So, and finally, if you actually enjoy this kind of concept, like the idea of a Drexel Live podcast show thing, let me know. I just would, some encouragement and whatnot would really decide on whether or not I should continue forward with this whole show. So yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to really talk about. So I'll try and, if this goes well, I'll try and record a new episode as soon as I can. So see you around.